This was a masterclass in how not to do crisis communications. I mean, genuinely, they did exactly the wrong thing at every step. The problem is at the various highest levels. People are making decisions too late. They need to be saying straight away. I mean, as soon as the hole develops, you just stop. You say, we're going to take a long time. You don't say more news at 2 p.m. You just look like absolute amateurs. You need to be much clearer. You need to be able to make decisions. And they couldn't make decisions.
It's Sunday evening, and therefore it's time for the Paddock Pass Podcast Grand Prix Review Show. We're going to be talking about round 2, the Brazilian Grand Prix at the Ayrton Senna International Circuit. Dave, I started our Paddock Note show yesterday by serenading you both. And to be honest, the reviews on our sort of Patreon and Discord channel were a little bit scathing. Well, they were kind of mixed, actually. There were also some nice comments. So I'm not going to burst into song again. But we have quite a few things to sing about on this show. First of all, we're going to delve into some of our talking points that we saw from the Grand Prix race. Yes, the race did go ahead despite some consternation and some doubts.
It sort of went ahead.
Yeah, there's always some kind of dramatic or theatrical element into MotoGP these days. So you have to be a little bit grateful for that. We're going to go through our categories. We've got our moments. We've got our winners and losers. We've got our grades for the Grand Prix. We've also got some of our updates for our predictions from our Patreon listeners, as well as our Alpine Styles Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League. So to kick things off very quickly, let's just jump straight into it. Neil, what was your moment from this Grand Prix in Brazil?
My moment came on Saturday when our colleague who works for TNT Sports, Alana Fellows, messaged to say that there was a sinkhole developing on the start and finish straight, but without any other detail. And I thought, surely not. And then photos started coming through of the sinkhole being sawed around and then stones being dumped into this new hole, which had been made on the start-finish straight. And then a very quick and hasty sort of refilling job. I mean, this was just a sort of crazy thing that you don't really come to expect when you watch MotoGP these days. And it sort of feeds into that narrative that we were building up pre-race, that strange things happen when we go to Brazil. I mean, you look back through the annals of history, we had a strange radioactive event the first time we went to Goiânia in 1987, which I think was quite tragic in circumstances for some people that lived in the city back then. The race nearly got cancelled when we went to Interlagos in 92. We had the electricity being cut by the electricity company in Rio in 96 or 97 because the circuit hadn't paid its electricity bill. And I think this fresh story fits nicely into the annals of our kind of wacky weekends in Brazil that we've had.
Is it also because you love the fact that it became meme GP?
Right.
It was one of the more memeable moments, I think, of MotoGP recent history. My personal favorite was, that scene in Shawshank Redemption where the prison manager,
the warden,
the warden takes away the poster and looks into this massive hole that's been dug behind the poster, and someone's put Carmelo Espeleta's head on the prison warden's body, which I thought, that's proper.
Does that mean that Marco Bezzecchi was the man who waded through half a mile of shit to breathe fresh freedom? Maybe a topic up for debate. Dave, full credit to you for Meme GP. That was your saying. So apologies for not mentioning it earlier. But Mr. Emmett, what was your moment? I mean, Neil picked something that had nothing to do with the racing.
Well, I'm going to pick something which is sort of half to do with Neil's moment and half to do with the racing, which is the fact that with about 4 minutes to go, they decided that the race wasn't going to be 31 laps. It was going to be 23 laps, much to the consternation and disappointment of a few riders. I mean, at all points...
Who makes that decision, Dave?
Race direction makes the decision. I mean, it was based on, because we were given, because of deterioration on the track. And obviously we're going to talk about this in great detail later on. But basically that's a race direction one. It was based on, the condition of the track. The track had been coming up a little bit during Moto2 qualifying. There'd been bits and pieces of the track just not in great condition. this is apart from the repaired hole, and around sort of turns 10 and 11, or 11 and 12, I think there were bits of the tarmac was starting to come up. Also, people were saying, I think turn 4 was really, really slippery. There was a few places which was really, really slippery. So basically, they weren't sure that the tarmac was going to hold. It was also extremely hot. Track temperatures of like 60 degrees or something. It was actually reminiscent of the first time I went to Indonesia, I think, because there were stones coming up and all the rest of it, and it's just again, we'll come on to all of the issues, but it made it interesting because no one, I think a couple of riders changed tires, but everyone started off with a full tank of fuel for 31 laps because they didn't have time to, because normally you're just carrying around all this excess fuel. You could have got rid of a couple of litres of fuel, and ideally, you would also want to change your electronics a little bit because you can use a little bit more power because you've got a bit more fuel. You could change the power as well because the tires don't have to go so far. So yeah, it added yet more chaos.
Dave, it's very unlike you to have chosen a moment of anarchy as for your selection of this particular race, but I'm liking it anyway. I'm going to make a quick nomination for Marc Marquez's pass on Digia in one of the very few left-hand corners on the track. Surprise, surprise. And it was it just made me think that MotoGP is so much better for the presence of an attacking, confident Marc Marquez. And yes, he kind of pushed Digia wide a little bit, and there was a fantastic frontal kind of slow-mo shot where you could see that the Italian's left shoulder was like rubbing on the Ducati Lenovo fairing, and I thought there's just one shot there that just amidst all the talking points and chaos of MotoGP really just sums up what this sport is about. It was a fair fight. It kind of carried on from the Saturday sprint. And I was just full of sort of admiration of Marquez at that moment, and glad that Digia also managed to sort of fight back and profit from Marc's later mistake to get that podium finish.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked the fact that Digia, paid him straight back again. No quarter was asked for, no quarter was given, and it was just also because the track is so tight, so passing was difficult. But yeah, it was definitely fun.
Adam Wheeler, Neil Morrison and David Emmett on this Paddock Pass podcast show, brought to you by renthal.com. If you're looking for a quality accessory for your road bike, then head to renthal.com, use the Fit My Bike tool to find exactly what you need for the bike in your garage or on the street. Plenty to choose from there, thanks to Renthal for backing the podcast over these last couple of years. Let's get straight into this, our sort of review show. Neil, let's just mention... Okay, we've got the track, we've got the facility, we've got the occurrences, the instances, the circumstances of this race. But before we get to that, I think we have to give credit to Marco Bezzecchi. 4 consecutive victories now, if we're counting the 2 at the end of 2025. Aprilia looking masterful. Is this a situation where the Italians are just using that harder tyre carcass? Is Bezzecchi really in a position now where we have to stop asking questions about his suitability for championship contention? All of these little questions are just surfacing after what was another first lap to flag bout of dominance, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Sunday there were a lot of similarities to Thailand, but the weekend as a whole was very different for Bezzecchi compared to Thailand, because he came into Thailand probably as the favourite after the preseason test. From the first session on Friday morning, was the man to beat very clearly, but here he had a terrible Friday outside the top 10, had to go through Q1, but managed to turn it around. Qualified really well. fourth in the sprint. Sprints still are not quite his speciality. You know, he did say that when they have the softer rear tire, that tends to push the front a little bit more, and he's not completely comfortable. But then when they switch to the medium for the Sunday, for the feature race, the longer race, everything just seems to work so well. And yeah, I mean, it's just the way that he is so dominant. I mean, it's kind of Jorge Lorenzo-esque. 4 races that you say in a row that he's won at, but 4 races that he's led from start to finish, in which he hasn't been headed at any point. I think 101 laps, Lewis Sotheby was saying on the commentary, consecutive laps that he's been in the front. And that is approaching kind of Jorge Lorenzo at his peak levels of, performance in MotoGP. So
can we say do-an-esque yet?
No. Have you not had your medicine, Dave? But yeah, I mean, it's a very, very positive start. You're always a little apprehensive of reading too much into these early races when things are a bit up in the air and a bit left field. I mean, you know, this has been a very strange weekend. I'm not sure that this will be a completely useful guide to how things are going. But the fact that it kind of backs up what we saw in Thailand, that, you know, Aprilia had the comfortable beating of Ducati in these conditions on Sunday, it bodes very well for them.
Dave, Jorge Martin taking second place. We'll speak about him a little bit later, but it just underlines the fact that Aprilia have really got things right at the moment. Certainly in, I don't want to say similar conditions, but the track was hotter than it had been throughout the weekend. Finally, that good weather arrived. You know, I think even Martin in the press conference said he felt the GP was under threat on Wednesday just because of the downpours and the way it was lashing, the Ayrton Senna International Circuit. But Aprilia, it seems stupid to say, really, this sort of close to the end of the race, but not to speak about Marco Bezzecchi as a title candidate in the last year of this 1000cc era, if you like, MotoGP, seems daft.
Yeah, I mean, of course he's a title candidate. He's still going to get beaten by Marc Marquez, but he is absolutely a title candidate. Aprilia have made a big step. And again, I keep saying this, I'm going to say it again. I think so much of this is because of Jorge Martin's absence last year. They made a huge step with all of the bits and pieces that were missing. They had Lorenzo Savadori working on electronics, working on things like bike balance for, 12, 13, 14 weekends? That's a lot of time on the bike to actually be able to work and develop outside of the normal testing program. And they really, really benefited from that. Did fantastic work over the winter. They've got their aerodynamic package works. I'm still not entirely sure how much difference that F-duct thing is that they've got, but just the whole package is really good. I do think that there were a couple of tracks which really, really suited, but with the Buriram here, because again, this was a corner speed track. This is a track with lots of really long corners where the Aprilia is also good. Conditions were hot, but 3 Aprilias in the top 5.
Agora, let's not forget him.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think 3 in the top 6 on Saturday as well. So just class.
It was really interesting listening to Didier in the press conference. He was obviously trying to hold on to the 2 Aprilias, well, to Martin mostly in Sunday's race. And he just commented that when conditions are as hot and as slippery as they were today, he was just saying that the force with which the Aprilia riders are able to push the front end on corner entry is kind of unmatched. He said, they're so stable, and the front is like completely planted. And it seems like Ducati just with this 26 bike are not quite having that total absolute confidence on the front end. So yeah, I mean, you just have to take your hats off to them. Again, I think we really have to wait a week. Because if we go to Kota and Aprilia are at least running Marquez close there, then I think we can really start to get excited that, they might be the new sort of focal point. But
Jerez, I think it has to be Jerez. If Aprilia competitive at Jerez, then
exactly.
The season's on.
No, I mean, not even Jerez. I mean, like, Jerez is the start of it, like, basically, once we get to, say, Mugello, like 3-4 races at Europe and Aprilia are still there, then you really know for sure. It will, I think it is a good point about Kota. Definitely, Kota will be a big, big difference because it's such a different track and it's such a non-Aprilia track, if you like. It's such a Ducati track. Plus, it's a loss of left-handers. But, I think... said it before, this is the concession system working. What has happened is they've held Ducati back. They've prevented Ducati from building on their advantage. And that has allowed the rest to keep working and to catch them.
The second major talking point of the Grand Prix is the Grand Prix itself. Heading to Goiânia for the first time since 1989. People who saw our preview show when we reviewed the 500cc 89 Grand Prix. Of course, the track looked completely different, as you would expect with the passage of time. There was a sense that perhaps it was too early, that the organisers, all the parties involved in bringing the Grand Prix to Brazil could have done with maybe another year of getting the circuit into condition. If we quickly try to list what we found or what we heard throughout sort of the time frame of the Grand Prix coming together, then we had a lot of rain in the build up to the GP, as we mentioned in our paddock note shows, biblical torrential downpours that washed out a lot of the paddock and eventually ended up moving a lot of the soil underneath the circuit itself. Neil mentioned the sinkhole, but there was also the track degradation that was the cause of the race being limited to 23 laps, which was right on the edge of the red flag distance. And goodness, I'm not too sure what to say, because I think my personal opinion is, on one hand, you have to give the organisers a little bit of leeway. It's their first GP there. It's their first real experience of handling an event of this scale. But then on the other hand, maybe they should have been better prepared for this, or there should have been more warning. I do have some sympathy with MotoGP Sport Entertainment Group, because if you have the boss of the circuit or the organizer or the promoter calling them in Madrid saying, yeah, we're going to be ready, no problem, we're going to be ready, then what do? You just put your faith in these people and hope that when you turn up, everything is going to roll out okay. Of course, you can't legislate for the weather, but then, the one big factor that made everything, I think, justifiable was the sold out grandstands and some of the atmosphere that we saw. And every single rider said the same thing. 148,000 attendants. I know you don't put much stock in it, Dave, but it looked busy. And I think it was almost 61,000 fans for race day. That alone is a reason for MotoGP to be in Brazil. But I think the Ayrton Senna International Circuit has got some serious work to do if we want to go back in 2027.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things wrong. You're right, absolutely. The fans proved that Brazil deserves a GP. They were fantastic. The atmosphere was fantastic. The show was fantastic. It's my understanding that actually the circuit didn't want MotoGP this year. They wanted MotoGP next year. They wanted to have World Superbikes this year to actually have a dry run, be able to practice with a lot less pressure, with a lot less of a spotlight. Talking about sort of, Dorna, the MSEG, about what they are, about them asking about progress. We know that IRTA and the FIM safety officer and a whole bunch of other people have also been at the track multiple times. I think they were at the track also either between the Sepang and the Buriram test, or after Buriram. There'd been lots and lots of times because they'd been putting a lot of pressure on it. They knew
Mike Webb, the race direction coordinator, I don't think was in Thailand. He was actually in Brazil at that time to oversee and make sure everything was kind of taking shape at a sufficient speed.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure put on the circuit to be ready. So MSEG knew exactly what they were getting themselves into. Also, we're there at the wrong time. We're there at the end of the rainy season, so it's been raining sort of all winter long, or their summer, if you like, the Southern Hemisphere's summer. Ground is saturated. This is the time you're going to have a lot of rain. So we're there at the wrong, and we're only there now because we're going to Kota afterwards, and MotoGP is too poor to split the races up.
Dave, just to cut across you, that's a great point, because I think every single Formula One Brazilian Grand Prix since 2010 has been held in November.
Yeah.
So perhaps that is a better time of year. Of course, I think, is it around Sao Paulo, the circuit they use, Interlagos? Yep. Yeah, and since I think it was, I was looking this up, and since 2003, it's always been held in November, October, or even once in September. And in 2003 was the time they held it in April. And guess what happened? Torrential rain. So I think rescheduling has to be one of the things on the agenda for the debrief.
Yeah, it needs to be held in September, which is the end of the basically the end of the dry period. There's a lot, like really a massively less rain. It's a little bit cooler as well. But yeah, just in terms of everything else, the surface, it's probably going to need to be resurfaced, because the surface wasn't laid. If the surface is already coming up, then the surface wasn't laid properly. The tarmac wasn't laid properly. They're going to have to resurface again, or at least try to look for some kind of a fix for it. We saw it was really weird that everyone seemed to be crashing at turn 4, which suggests there's like a real
turn 1.
Yeah, well, I mean, like turn 1, it's a really fast corner. You're coming with a lot of speed coming through, and then you're pitching it onto the side of the bike, and it's a really fast corner. So you can sort of understand that, but turn 4, you don't really understand why they would be crashing. And everyone, as soon as you got offline, people were crashing out. It did seem to be. I can't remember who it was. One of the riders was saying like he couldn't believe how low the grip was, which again you don't expect from a new circuit. So there was just lots and lots of things that were wrong. The potential is amazing, as you said. And also, the one thing about attendance, they said it was a record attendance. It's the first bloody time. How do you have a record attendance? I mean, like, if it had one fan turn up, it would have been a record attendance.
I mean, the riders seemed to like the layout. They said it was short. But they said it was fun. Neil, was this a bad look for MotoGP, do you think? Or do we have to, like I said at the top of this little segment, give some sort of leeway?
It was a bad look. I mean, I don't think there's any way to argue otherwise. If one of those events happened in isolation, you could say, well, this is a crazy situation. And if you look across at F1, there have been some very strange situations arise at new tracks. You think of the manhole covers the first time they went to Las Vegas, for example, is something that stands out. But for
Spa, when they had a podium after 3 laps or something.
Right, sure. But you know, it's the fact that so many of these things happened all within 5 or 6 days just showed that the event was nowhere near ready. And yeah, the fans were there in abundance from Friday, but when we were speaking to people, our colleagues that are at the track, I think there was a very common consensus that the facilities were nowhere near acceptable for an international racing series. I mean, no running water in the toilets one day, I think. Raw sewage kind of floating around the paddock in certain parts. The strange sight of prisoners from a local jail there working and helping to do some construction and maintenance work.
Well, it was Shawshank Redemption.
Exactly, yes. So that meme was more relevant than we actually realized. So extra credit for that. So yeah, you had all these kind of like very strange sights that were just quite odd. And then the situation today on Sunday where the track around turn 11 started to break up. You can actually see it from some of the photos. Cormac Ryan, meaning our photography colleague, was showing us some photos he had where stones were just everywhere. And yeah, the fact that the race was shortened at the very last minute, what were 4 minutes to go, and there was no immediate sort of explanation of what exactly was going on. We were told, okay, track degradation, but there was no further details given. Suddenly, for a big chunk of the race distance to be just chopped off like that at the last minute. And then I think another thing that Nea Bastianini was saying was that kind of depended on where you were on the grid when you learnt about the news. So the guys at the front of the grid, he felt, were told about the news immediately, and then it kind of filtered its way back. So he thought that some people had a bit of an unfair advantage. They were able to throw in a different tire when he had no chance to react. And yeah, I don't think that is a good look. I mean, would it not just have made more sense to delay the start by 10, 15 minutes and to kind of just take a deep breath? We saw I think shots from TNT Sports of Davide Tollozzi, really, really worked up when he was speaking to
What a surprise.
Carlos Espeleta. I know, who would have thought it, but you'd have to say with good reason. And I think, you wrote a really good article in this after Thailand ad about the kind of the discourse ongoing with the MSMA and with MotoGP when they're trying to negotiate the terms for the contract to stay on for 2027. And you do get the impression that there is this kind of growing frustration with the manufacturers where they're like, we're trying our best here and you're telling us to try and make things more professional, but then we come to these events where things are not really running in a sort of smooth way. I saw a comment from Davide Brivio, I think, to Sky Italia over the weekend on Saturday, and he was just saying like, this is not a good look. So yeah, I don't think.
Well, he said, I think it was something, Neil, like, I could be inaccurate here, but he asked, say, the promoters asking us to make investments. And we've covered this before about MotoGP Sport Entertainment Group saying you need more staff, you need to be more proficient in your marketing and communications. They're more presentation, if you like, in the paddock. But then, the manufacturers are turning around saying, well, what are you giving us kind of thing? I think that's where it's at.
This was a masterclass in how not to do crisis communications. I mean, genuinely, they did exactly the wrong thing at every step. Waiting for a long, and the problem is at the very highest levels. People are making decisions too late. They need to be saying straight away, okay, as soon as the hole develops, you just stop. You say, we're going to take a long time. You don't say more news at 2 p.m. or maybe we'll race at 3, maybe we'll race at 4, maybe we'll race at 5. That you just look like absolute amateurs. You need to be much clearer. You need to be able to make decisions, and they couldn't make decisions.
Some of the riders, though, Dave, credited the way that was handled. So it really does depend on your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, it depends on whether you're being paid to race or not, and don't want to upset your employer.
I mean, from one side, when you saw the sinkhole and you saw that they were actually pouring stones into a new hole, a bigger hole that they created around it, you thought, well, there's no chance that we're going to be racing on Saturday. So the fact that they did actually have the sprint and Moto3 qualifying afterwards, I mean, that is quite impressive how they reacted to that. It was an emergency situation. Should it have happened in the first place? No. But I mean, there was, I think, a fairly... It was quite impressive. They actually had a full day of racing today, and they've squeezed in Moto2 as well. But there was an element of haphazardness, I feel, over the whole event, where it did feel as though anything could have just gone completely wrong and tits up at any point. It did look to me like it was about to, with the level of the track degradation at turn 11 in the race. I think Alex Marquez said it was unacceptable for MotoGP racing on in those kind of circumstances, with riders getting pelted by stones. And, a couple of riders I noticed, sporting big bruises on their arms, on their fingers. It's not ideal.
Like in Indonesia, where the same thing was happening. But I mean, like, we're going from here to Kota, and in Kota, all of the Liberty big bosses are going to be there for the first time. And I suspect that there are going to be some quite noisy meetings between the two. And I suspect that, like, we will really see a big change there, where they start to have a look at, do we have to make some changes? We can't go on like this.
Some of the spy shots of the sinkhole being fixed because it wasn't broadcast on the live was actually more dramatic and entertaining than some of the sprint races. So I was thinking, this is great. How deep is it going to go? How big? It looked like a trench at one point. But yeah, you're right. Listen, just to cover off about the track, I mean, Neil, you mentioned it. I think Brad Binder called it a stone festival. Enea Bastianini, of course, was last on the grid in 22nd place. He said that he had a massive rock hit his shoulder when he was coming around at the end of the warm-up lap, and he said it was actually quite painful. He was showing some journalists in his media debrief what I can only assume was like a kind of splattering of roost, the likes of which motocross riders tend to have. So, yeah, like we said, there has to be some sort of post-mortem, some debrief, some dissection of, what went on in Brazil and the drastic improvements that really need to be made to pull this up, to give all those fans like an event, to be proud of, rather than us spending 20 minutes talking about some of the inconsistencies and the frustrations with it. But there we go. Let's move back to the racing itself. And second place, Jorge Martin. There was a couple of comments I saw online about us, or not necessarily us, but just the public or MotoGP fans in general, maybe devaluing Jorge's position in the 2026 World Championship somewhat, that we need to consider his revival a bit more seriously. First time he got on the podium since the end of 2024. And, if you couple this Grand Prix with Thailand, then he's very much sort of on his way back.
Yeah, this is what we thought we were going to see last year. He was brilliant in 24. He disappeared in 25 through his own stupidity, because he did manage to smash himself up extremely thoroughly throughout the season multiple times. But yeah, he's come back. He's on the bike. He's getting used to the bike. The bike is really good, and he's showing what he's made of. It's just a really, really class ride. And he's still not fully fit. He's still not where he's going to be. This would be what is this? Sort of like this is like basically he's had perhaps a quarter or a third of a season on an Aprilia, so he's still playing catch up. So yeah, just really, really impressive. And I think you saw that especially on Saturday after the sprint, that he was so emotional about being able to put the journey that he's been through behind him, all of that suffering, and to finally arrive back where he feels he belongs.
Yeah, our Patreon backers agreed. They voted Jorge the rider of the GP. 38% of the vote went to Jorge, even though he finished second behind Bezzecchi. 35% of the vote went to Bezzecchi. He's second in the championship, which is quite remarkable considering he missed the Sepang test, considering the horror of last season, and the fact that he underwent surgery 2 times after the last race of last season again. I think he said in his press conference today that it was just, today's actually his 8th day on the bike this year, which, is significantly less than the rivals he's fighting against on track. And you could just see, I think, from the very start of this weekend that it was like the old Martinator. It was him. I use Martinator.
How dare you?
He's Martinating again. He is 100% Martinating again.
And that's the second time Neil said it in this weekend.
Yeah. I used to always say sick in a very ironic way because, that's what cool kids say, but now I just say it unironically. So it was a sick performance from the Martinator. There we go.
It was. I bet he's really looking forward to getting on a Yamaha next year.
Exactly. Yeah. And I quite appreciated the fact that he was quite unrepentant. He was asked about that, I think by Matt Burton after the flag. And he was like, no, that's, I back myself and my decisions 100%. But yeah, as I said, he was from Friday, iffy conditions in practice. It was drizzling slightly. Conditions where you don't necessarily want to lead the pack around, and everyone exited the pit lane together. And Martin was at the head of the pack. He actually overtook, I think it was Marquez, or maybe it was Johan Zarco, I can't quite remember, but he was pushing to get to the front of it. And I thought the guy is really keen to get back into some kind of intensive care ward somewhere.
Yeah.
In Goiânia.
He's really missing the hospital food.
Yeah, because this is just got big high side written all over it, but he did really well, had a solid session, and I just thought, okay, he's probably attacking it now, and we didn't really see that at any point last year. So yeah, great to see him back. And he said, I think to Natalie Quirk from TNT Sports, and we're going to fight until the end for this championship, which is pretty heady talk for a guy that's what, as Dave said, still had only a third of a season on this RSGP.
Is he wrong?
Yeah, no, but I think it's also the thing we have to remember, that when he falls off the motorcycle, he does tend to smash himself up, and more than other riders. And we're not just talking about 2025, but also if you remember before his purple patch with Ducati, some big injuries, some big crashes. So we're talking about sort of, not, I wouldn't say a fragile human being, but that propensity to end up in hospital is what could sort of keep him away from the championship picture.
He has a touch of the Pedrosas about him.
Yeah, but perhaps. I'm sure he'll be happy with the win total that Danny eventually.
Yeah. Well, what a rider!
There's something else related to this, of course, and you brought it up briefly. Has the silly season been too silly? Because while it was another horrific Grand Prix for Pecco Bagnaia, he must be looking at the Aprilias thinking, what a time to sort of leave the previously authoritative manufacturer in MotoGP for this one. Although, of course, we know 2027 is a step into the unknown. Whereas Jorge Martin must be thinking, well, fucking hell, am I really going to be racing a Yamaha next year? Especially if he does sort of go on some hot streak with the Aprilias. And then the Trackhouse situation. I mean, there's all sorts of undercurrents, which is probably quite a nice word for this Grand Prix in the track, going on in the paddock with riders and their potential movements, because Raul Fernandez was hot property in Thailand. He was outperformed comprehensively by his teammate here in Brazil. And then, of course, who goes where, who does what? Pedro Acosta apparently signing for Ducati. What was he thinking now? I don't know. Has the silly season been too silly?
Yeah, I mean, we all know this. We all know that signing riders in January or February for the next 2 years before the current season has even started is kind of ridiculous. But it's a situation when you have 19 of 22 riders out of contract at the end of the year. Like, you can only get the guy that you want by acting very quickly and very decisively, and that then has a massive sort of knock-on effect for the rest of the grid, because they're like, oh well, if he's signed for them, then I need to get myself in place, and it kind of spreads very quickly, like kind of wildfire. So yeah, I think it is stupid. I think it's it has backfired before for factories to kind of sign up so riders so early. I mean, there's a couple of these signings where I'm sure the factories are thinking, well, we might have to check the small print and see if we can maybe backtrack on that. KTM and Maverick Vinales being a prime example. But you were asking specifically about Martin. I'm sure he's thinking, okay, Aprilia's in a great situation, but I'm sure he's also looking at what Fabio Quartararo did this weekend and thinking, if he was fourth in qualifying in that bike, in his second race on that bike, and he was sixth in the sprint, at one point second in just his second race, I mean, it's not terrible. It's not a complete disaster. Like, preseason was a disaster, but I think there's been enough in the kind of the showings of the first two races to say that, Yamaha are not maybe as bad as we feared. So yeah.
And it's a different bike. Next year is going to be a different bike. They'll have a year of experience developing this. I still think they're going to be behind, but they won't be as bad as they are now.
Sorry to pop your Honda cushion as well, Dave, but hearing Luca Marini say that we've made steps forward, but so has everybody else, and the team and the manufacturer collectively have to rectify that. It was a little bit dismaying, really, after all the positivity of 2025. Still some work to do in Joan Mir. I mean, maybe we'll get onto him later, but what a record. Dave, I wanted to ask you more about Ducati, because Didier and Marc Marquez going face-to-face, entertainment, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Didier getting on the podium for the first time. Marc missing the podium twice now, yet to get a trophy, in terms of the Grand Prix race in 2026. And was that the first time he's finished a GP not being on the podium since Jerez last year, or the end of 2024 in Malaysia? Because of course he fell in Jerez, right?
It's the first time he's finished off the podium in a race that he hasn't crashed in since Austria 2024.
Oh, wow. Good stat. There we go. Why am I asking you, Dave? I should just ask Neil.
Yeah, exactly. Ask someone who knows. I mean, don't ask the idiot.
Well, listen, Mark said he's lacking feeling still on the bike. Didier, as Neil kind of hinted, was talking about the instability with the front end of the Desmos Adichie. They still haven't got that working. Bagnaia was saying that entry and braking is still one part that he's happy with when it comes to the bike, but the rest is kind of shades as well of 2025. So it does sound like a bit of a mixed bag.
A very mixed bag. I think, to an extent, Ducati are our victims of their own success. They've been building this bike. I mean, the bike's been getting better and better and better and better, and it reached a pinnacle in 2024. The trouble with building a really fantastic bike is it gets very difficult to improve it, and every change you make can lead you in a wrong direction. And it feels like they've just gone around and round in circles looking for an improvement and not finding it, just making changes to try to get more performance and failing. as well, as I've said repeatedly, motorcycle design is one massive compromise. You get to choose, like which of the bits are going to be shit. And what you want to do is to make sure that when you add up all of the bits which are shit, they're a little bit less shit. The total is a little bit less shit than everyone else's. It's.
Are those direct Delinea quotes, Dave?
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. But yeah, I mean, literally, it's just. The whole thing is really, really complex, and it's really easy to go astray. And especially if you're in a really good place, you start looking for more performance which just isn't there, or you start making sacrifices which you don't realize the consequences of until you've made them. So I really think that they've reached pretty much a pinnacle. Perhaps the GP24 is the best MotoGP motorcycle that has ever been built and ever will be built in the 1000cc format. Perhaps it just can't get better than that. And perhaps also, this is the last year of Michelin. They haven't changed the tires, so there's no more performance to be gained from the tires as well, and that is probably catching people out as well. So they're just going around in circles looking for more performance, and it's simply not there. It's just not there.
Well, go on, Neil. Sorry.
I mean, I think we do have to be slightly careful before making these sweeping statements. I'm looking at you, Dave, because it was only about 6 weeks ago after the Sepang test, and it was like, oh my God, Ducati are going to be pissing this championship.
It still says Marc Marquez is going to sweep the board.
It's still a fantastic bike. It's just that it's not, it's not as dominant as it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark was saying, I think it was after the sprint, he was saying that, even though he's not 100%, he feels that this bike is still not really completely in line with his riding style. He said it's still some way off the kind of feeling that he had last year when everything just kind of came so naturally to him. He said, when you're fighting with the bike, you use more energy. And he felt that the reason why he was so strong on Saturday here in Brazil was because Friday was pretty much in wet conditions or in iffy conditions, so it wasn't completely at his 100%, so he's able to kind of conserve energy, which gives you an impression that he's still a decent way off being 100% fully fit. But yeah, it's it's not necessarily worrying, but certainly when you look at someone like Bagnaia, who looked really well in tune with this year's bike, and just how any kind of preseason optimism has quickly evaporated, it's that is concerning for sure. But I guess, positives this weekend. Digia looked really, really good. Had a pretty fast crash in warm-up, tweaked his left shoulder and said he was in quite a lot of pain at the start of the race. But how he battled back and how he really went toe-to-toe with Mark, again, was pretty impressive. So a couple of little positives here and there. And you may be looking at Digia. I think he would have felt confident of being up in that podium fight in Thailand had he not had an issue. I think it was maybe with his ride height device. But you may be looking at Digia in the first couple of races of this year and thinking maybe he could be, the sort of wingman to Mark this year in the kind of Ducati squad.
I'm going to come back to, I think, Neil's point. Let's get to Jerez first. These are all very weird races. We had, a weird Buriram. We've had a very extraordinarily weird Brazil. We're going to a weird Kota next. Let's get back to the boring, silly tracks in Europe, and then we'll find out.
Yeah, and is it too early to be sort of drawing the comparison to Mark at Honda in that it slowly just became a bike that only he could ride and no one really else?
Yeah, too early.
Okay. Well, wheel that out in Jerez when he's first and, the next Ducati's in sixth. And
Dave, I'm a little bit worried that everything is weird or shit.
Well,
is there something you want to tell us, Dave?
That's going to be the title of my autobiography.
Well, listen, some people can have a party in the stands and other people have to carry a huge bag of gravel onto a straight and fill a hole. So on that note, we're going to go into our winners and losers segment of the podcast. And Dave, who is your first party animal?
My party animal is Jorge Martin for all of the reasons which we've said. He's been fantastic. He's much better than we expected, and he deserves it as well.
Neil, who's your samba dancer?
Yeah, also it was his music taste as well, Dave, right?
His music taste definitely puts him very much in the losers, but then you should not allow MotoGP riders to choose music because their music taste is generally absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, for anyone that didn't listen to our Paddock Note show from last night, Jorge shouted out a lyric from a famous Brazilian song to the crowd on Saturday, which was...
He did it again this morning in the rider parade.
Oh, did he really? O Pai
Yeah.
Kai On, which translates to Daddy's Online, which I think is a very apt title for one Mr. David Emmett. Someone was saying we should program our Discord server forever. Whenever you connect, it kind of pops up and says that to anyone else that's on the server as well.
All I'm going to say is that if you want a top Brazilian tune, then I can recommend a certain ratios, O Fermier, O Grido, which is class.
Gilberto Gil. Check him out.
Oh, yeah. No. I'm prepared to accept Gilberto Gil as a...
Gilberto Gil, yeah. Sorry, Ed, we got a bit sidetracked there.
Yeah, just, guys, you fancy talking about MotoGP instead of obscure Brazilian artists, I'm here for you.
Yeah, apologies. I'm going to choose Fermin Aldeguer for my winner. Maybe not being talked about because of all the sort of drama that went on today, but first weekend back, first time riding a MotoGP bike this year, first time riding a MotoGP bike since November 2024. Friday was only his third time on any motorcycle, I believe, this calendar year, because the first day I think was when he sustained that serious leg injury. The second was I think last week in the lead up to Brazil, and came out double top 10 on Friday. Very, very lucky to avoid a massive crash in the sprint when he completely spun up his rear off the line and kind of almost careered sideways. And very fortunate to kind of save that. But yeah, just a solid, in some ways unremarkable ride today, but considering the circumstances, really impressive. 8th place. I just thought like that. I thought Fermin was going to be way, way rustier than that. It seems that he's a bit more comfortable on the bike than he is walking. He's still carrying a crutch around the track. I think even in his wildest dreams, he wouldn't have predicted being this high up in his comeback ride. And also it seems to be a weekend, this also came in a weekend when it appears he is signed for the VR46 Ducati team for next year, which I think is quite an astute signing from Rossi's team. So I think many reasons to celebrate for Fermin.
Yeah, one of the stories we may have to get some information on in COTA next week, Neil, is going to be the future of the Gresini team, with Alex Marquez allegedly going stage left and then Fermin Aldeguer stage right to Italy. Then what happens to those guys, as well as, of course, the situation with Ducati, because they're going to have to field extra brand new 850s. It's not like they can give their satellite team a year-old bike at a cheaper rate. I mean, it's going to be an expensive season in 2027.
Well, they could.
Yeah, of course they could. My winner, I'm going to opt for another understated hero in Ayagura. Top 5, 2 5th positions in a row now for MotoGP. And if there is somebody, I just think he's starting to make a more solid but slightly unspectacular case for retaining his services with the American team. And, I think that's the second best start to a season for Agura since he was in Moto3 in 2020. 2 5th places, really good job in his second season. And okay, he's on currently the best bike in MotoGP, but he's sort of quietly going at it and posting those consistent finishes. So well done, and also for having the extra moment of class by apologizing for overtaking Fabio Quartararo and adding more abuse to the Frenchman's sorry quarry. It has to be said.
A question. Diogo Moreira. Nobody's going to choose them as his winner.
The sprint was good, but the race, no.
No. I chose my winner already, Dave. Were you not listening?
Yeah. Dave, who was your poor soul who had to drag the bag of gravel across the track and get his spade out?
My hole digger is it's KTM. They were just pretty poor, really. We really saw. I mean, you saw it most with Pedro Acosta, but Acosta was just getting creamed on it was like watching a Yamaha. He was getting creamed on the straight. He was riding really hard, and only to get really hard on the brakes, only to get creamed on the straights. And it looks like it's strange because we know that the KTM is the most powerful bike on the grid, but they must have changed something. They must have changed something either in the aero or in the engine, in the electronics to try to tame the engine, or they're using higher drag aerodynamics because they've got more horsepower, but they've gone one step too far. Because, Pedro has been passed really, really easily. So yeah, it just feels like that they've made a misstep somewhere. But again, it's weird. It's Brazil. Let's see what they're like in other tracks. And they were fantastic in Buriram, which is a really high speed track. So maybe just their simulations. Maybe their simulations were wrong.
I mean, Binder had a pretty good GP in Thailand, Dave, but Acosta, of course, was the standout. But then the Tech 3 boys really struggled, as was the case also in Brazil. And Acosta was complaining a lot about top speed, as you mentioned. So much so that he was already tempering expectations for Austin, where he said there's two massive straights there for us to contend with. I think also the KTM's seem to have a problem. I mean, Maverick Vinales was talking a lot about this, saying he has too much grip on the rear, and it's just making it too much of a fight with the front of the bike. He said he's fighting the bike every meter of the track, and he almost has to. He was going in his own development with the RC16, but then he started the race today on a similar setting to the other riders because he said that was important to almost deconstruct his expectations of what he's getting from the bike and then rebuild it back up. So it sounds like, Maverick's not really going to be anywhere until, we get to a different set of tires or maybe more consistent racetracks. We know he's really good around Kota, so let's see if, he doesn't turn the corner there with a KTM. But it's pretty depressing also for Bastianini, and you have to wonder what his future is going to be like in MotoGP at the moment, because those results are not really singing for him at all. Where else were we? Neil, who was your loser from the Grand Prix?
So your loser, sorry, just to clarify, was Tech 3, Ed?
No, my loser, I was just sort of expanding a little bit on Dave's point, but my loser was Joan Mir. And Neil, I couldn't remember the statistic, but it's pretty grim reading, isn't it, for the Spaniard in HLC colours? And there was some pre-Grand Prix rumours of, linking him to Trackhouse in the place of Raul Fernandez, even to the point where his manager, I think Paco Sanchez, made a tweet saying something like, "Thank you to everyone for all these rumours. It appears I don't have any work to do whatsoever." Basically dismissing all the chatter. But I mean, Joan didn't make the strongest case again for staying in Honda for 2027 when we know that one rider is already going to be out because Fabio's incoming. So poor Joan Mir, he was my victim from this Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was a really, really good ride before he crashed. But that crash part is a little more substantial than the really good riding beforehand.
I think you've just summed up his entire season. It was a really good ride until he crashed. I mean, you could pretty much just plug that into almost any race over the past, since he joined Honda.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned it already, Ed, but I'm going to have to plump for Maverick Vinales. I mean, you could say that the love affair is coming to an end in many aspects, not just with me. But I mean...
Hang on, Neil, I've got my tissue here. Hang on. Sit around somewhere. Wait.
You're so fickle. There we go. Honestly. You're so fickle.
I know.
Maybe with KTM and Maverick, I don't know now. I'm just jibing there. But I mean, it was interesting that Jorge Lorenzo's Instagram indicated that he was in Switzerland this weekend. And I was off the impression that Jorge was going to be at all the races this year with Maverick. And it really does seem as though... Yeah, it's really gone quite far south. He was 6 seconds off. He was last, and he was 6 seconds off the next best placed rider, which is just a million miles where we were kind of expecting Maverick to be after a really promising Sepang test. And since then, he just hasn't really been able to find any kind of feeling. Yeah, 36 seconds off after 23 laps. I mean, that's a substantial margin around I think the second shortest track on the calendar. So, it's very much back to the drawing board for Maverick.
Which of you two gentlemen has the list of clever clogs from our Patreon listeners and backers who managed to get the predictions right?
Well, there were only 3 patrons that managed to correctly predict that Bezzecchi was going to win Sunday's race. So big shout outs to RSP76, Paul Carter and Caddy Gale. We also have to compliment the full guys Ricardo and again RSP76 for correctly predicting that Bez would be leading the championship at this point, this early point in the season. And a couple of interesting answers. One of the questions we asked was how many football references would we hear this weekend before Dave melted down? to which Paul McMullen retorted, hasn't he already? And Yanni also mentioned never get between Dave and his balls, which is probably quite a timely comment too. So Dave, you're still not very, you're still here. You haven't melted down despite all the football shirts, and Cafu was there. I mean,
Roma legend.
It was, well, yeah. I mean, at a certain point, the pain levels become so high that any extra football references are just, well, they become irrelevant, really. Anyway, but I mean, like, I was just very pleased that your team managed to not lose for a change.
Oh, it was amazing, 6-1. But you go 4 games, you go on a 4-game losing streak, conceding 12 goals, and then you win back-to-back games by scoring 9. Just shows how insane the world is. I don't know how I'm supposed to emotionally exist, with this kind of, background noise going on. But best we don't talk about football anymore, Neil?
Yeah, can we just can I go back and change my moment of the GP to the moment in the press conference on Thursday when Diogo Moreira was asked if he could ask Pele one question, what would it be? I mean, like, Pele is dead, right? I mean, that's
What's he doing in my room? You're dead.
Oh, listen, for anybody who's listening or watching the podcast, wondering, anybody who's wondering what we're talking about, our Patreon channel, where we have loads of other content. We have Paddock Note shows that we record on Friday and Saturday, especially for subscribers. Come and join us on there, because we also talk to everybody through a Discord community channel, and we ask stuff of listeners and followers, like the predictions, and we try to have a bit of fun around Grand Prix events. Another area of fun, I guess you could say, Dave, is the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League. At this point, I hand over to you.
Yes, but wisely, because your record remains unbeaten, Adam.
But I had Digia.
You did, yeah, but that was about it, I think. Let's go through the top 3 quickly. First is someone called Cohen with 449.5 points. Second is Jimbo 182 with 444.5 points. And third is One Love for Ride, One Ride for Love, which is an extremely complicated name, with 440 points. Of the internal podcast battle is really tense, because we have an actual draw. Both Neil and Steve on 268.5 points, but for some reason where I haven't looked at the rules to see how they do it, Neil is actually 1,058th, while Steve is 1,059th. So Neil has the edge there. I'm 1192nd. With 257 points, and you're 1481, which is a little bit further back, with 223 points. So you've got some hard work to do. I presume you've got Pecco in your team. You usually do. Or it'll either be Pecco or Maverick, won't it be?
No. I had Digia in there and Aprilia, but it wasn't enough. But anyway, come and join us. Go on, Neil.
Yeah, I forgot to change my team, and I managed to remarkably catch Steve. So,
I think this is the secret. The secret is to forget to change your team, and then
it all
that's right. I mean, like I managed to get minus 2.5 points for picking Joan Mir, because I thought, he's looking a bit tasty. I mean, the talk about being a sucker for punishment. As much as I love it, genuinely, he's a nice guy, and he's really fast, but he's just really good at falling off.
Dave's team's gone into administration. Minus point. There we go. Grades for the Brazilian Grand Prix to finish the podcast. I'm going to say 5 out of 10. Pretty good, but must do better. You have a following, you have an audience, and wow, it was a noisy one. It was one that was adding a sort of its own flair to a Grand Prix event. So hopefully, Senna International Circuit could be in better shape for 2027, potentially in another spot on the calendar. Let's see, maybe with Argentina coming back in, Argentina could be back-to-back paired with Cota, and Brazil could be slotted in somewhere else that's maybe a little bit more apt for the weather. Yeah, a review has to be made, but I'm going to say 5 out of 10. Dave, for you?
I'm going to give it 11 out of 10 because it was the stupidest Grand Prix we've seen in years. I think I wrote last night on the site, the stupidest Grand Prix since Silverstone 2018.
That didn't happen.
Well, that didn't happen. Exactly. And just everything that could go wrong did go wrong in a really stupid way, and I really enjoyed it. So 11 out of 10 for effort.
Neil, can you follow that?
I can't. I felt like we should have left Dave for last because there's absolutely no following that at all. I'm going to go with a 5. I mean, there were, as we've mentioned before, there were plenty of things to like in this weekend. Really good crowd that were there seemed to be having a really good time. Everyone was very enthusiastically greeting Diogo Moreira anytime he was on track. There's certain points during the commentary you could hear a really good atmosphere. Everyone singing, and it seemed that the Brazilian fans were thrilled to have MotoGP back on their soil for the first time since 2004, which was great. But yeah, it just seemed. I mean, this was just a year too early, wasn't it, for the venue? I think. And yeah, as we previously mentioned, there were one or two parts which just became one big giant meme.
Exactly. It was it was good days for the MotoDank Reddit. But I mean, you really felt that this has the potential to be the Jerez of the overseas races, really, because of the atmosphere. I mean, like, I was miles away, and yet I could sense there was a real festival atmosphere. There's so much potential. The fans were great. I liked the circuit layout, but even though it is a bit tight, and overtaking is difficult. But yeah, it has so much potential.
All that remains is to remind everybody to get your questions in for our debrief show, which we hope to record before Neil and I travel to Texas this week. If you haven't already, then submit a question about the Grand Prix. We'll try to answer it, and we'll try to get that recorded on Tuesday at some point. So if there's something that's gnawing at your conscience or your curiosity, then let us know by Monday evening at the latest, and we'll get it recorded in our next podcast show. In the meantime, David, Neil, thank you. Good luck with the work into the evening, and thank you to Renthal for backing the podcast. We'll be back soon.